You're listening to Masters Decoded podcast series. I'm your host and the chief decoder, Anis Merchant. Through this podcast, I bring in guests who are successful in a different walk of life to decode and map out their careers and journeys with the hope that we gain all our learnings. The world around us is changing exponentially, and how the impact of artificial intelligence, technology, and other socio-economic factors have either influenced or enhanced my guests' careers. In today's episode, I invite you on the first part of the two-part show of a magical journey with Daniel Chan. Dan Chan, master magician, is an internationally renowned, award-winning magician whose magic has taken him all over the world. Based in the San Francisco Bay Area, Dan is regarded as one of the nation's top corporate magicians and perform at events for thought leaders and influencers worldwide. Dan Chan presents the ultimate entertainment experience featuring world-class sleight of hand, playful pickpocketing, and careful craft of mind. He has created several new routines integrating smartphones and iPads into unique, one-of-a-kind performances that are photo-worthy moments your guests will capture and share on Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram. Dan's signature culture, Bien Lian performance is a legend among tech billionaires and Silicon Valley elite. The conversation is so precious that I felt the need to decode his story in two parts. Find out why BuzzFeed named Dan Chan Master Magician Silicon Valley's favorite magician. Without much further ado, let me get on with it.
Hi, Dan. Welcome to Masters Decoded podcast series. Really glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Anis.
And I'm sure this session today is going to be magical as we go through and decode your journey. And since I brought this magical topic out, Dan, would you want to quickly, in your own words, talk a little bit about yourself, what you do currently?
I've done about 5,000 plus shows. I've worked for companies such as AirBnB, Google, Zoomingo, every major corporation I've worked for in the Bay Area and globally. Performed in Japan 4 times, Mexico, Hawaii, Shanghai, Las Vegas, Germany, and literally around the world. Right now, I am doing Zoom shows, so you can find out more about the Zoom shows on Airbnb Experiences.
Pretty impressive, Dan. And when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, it was interesting. You started your career at PayPal. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was PayPal pre-IPO alongside Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and this was in the early 2000s. And I actually gave up 3/4 of my stock options to pursue my career as a magician. So I left a lot of money on the table.
Did you repent it when you did that?
It just wasn't for me. I just decided that I wanted to pursue entertainment, and I didn't want to give up those 3 years.
Okay. And why in entertainment magic?
It was my niche. I knew that I loved figuring things out, but I also knew how to entertain people, fool them really badly. And also things like pickpocketing. I'm a master pickpocket. I can steal people's watches and wallets from them without them knowing it. And there's quite a few videos on my website that show the pickpocketing aspect as well.
Wow. That can be dangerous, right? Pickpocketing, like showing how to do it? Or do you show how to do it?
I don't show how to do it. It's a very difficult skill. However, I have pickpocketed police officers, federal agents. I've pickpocketed Jason Mayhem Miller of Bully Beatdown, or a UFC fighter, this big guy. But I always do magic before I pick people's pockets. Otherwise, you can get a fist, unwelcome fist. So
for sure. Yeah. So now I understand you kind of revealed that you're going to do a magic. You didn't do pickpocket just to go and tease them a little bit. Is that correct?
I don't tell them that they're going to get their pockets picked. However, they've seen enough magic where they're laughing, and I know that I'm going to entertain them and they're not going to be offended.
Okay, good. So, and before we started recording, you showed me a trick which I'm still amazed with. And you spoke about now doing this over Zoom. How do you keep people still, because magic is also being very close and near, and somebody that they can not only just see it but they can experience it, because as the audience get involved more with your trick, the more it's fun and it's more real for them. So how's the technology and how's Zoom helping you to get closer to your potential customers?
Every medium has its advantages and disadvantages. So what you want to do is leverage what the advantages are to do things that you typically wouldn't be able to do. For example, I have a lot more around me. I don't have to set up my set. For example, you see right there a beautiful set. I would never be able to carry this if I was doing a one-off corporate show. It's just way too heavy. I've got a lot of things that you don't see behind the scenes that really make my Zoom show just as good as my regular show, if not better. It's
Wow.
because we have so many things here to access, which I would not be able to do if you hired me for a one off. And now I have a theater. If you really think about pivoting,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people think about the disadvantages. When this thing came, this COVID 19, it's actually a blessing in disguise because I was able to reinvent myself. I was on the cover of Hustle,
Okay.
cover of Business Insider, and I was also on BuzzFeed previously. And all this massive media attention got me into 2 million plus inboxes on the Hustle. Probably hundreds of thousands of people saw me on Business Insider. And Business Insider is a pretty big thing.
Yeah,
And that
it is.
that really was great.
That's impressive, Dan. And as you rightly said, sometimes technology is a blessing and a bane also. And you spoke about setting up the stage and putting this show up for large corporates today. How do you go about reaching out, and who does that for you from a sales? Do you get inbound or do you have people doing that for you?
I have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account, which I contacted you through. I
Yep.
did a comprehensive search on podcasting.
Okay.
I'm trying to grow into a global brand. Right now, I'm very, very well known within the corporate segment of the Bay Area and also nationally with influencers and including billionaires around the world. But now that I'm selling ticketed shows at 20 US dollars a head, that's what it's currently at. I'm trying to
Hmm.
reach as many people, trying to pack out a show for at least 20, 25 people per show at that price point. And getting to a global reach is one of the strategies that I came up with.
That's impressive. So apart from being a magician, you're almost a businessman who's trying to do sales, is trying to do marketing, and is also trying to build a brand of its own, right? Which is Daniel Chan. Um, uh, are you doing all by yourself, or you have help around you?
I I have a videographer. My wife is a great help and copywriter. My kids perform with me. My son is 12 years old. He juggles 3, 4, and 5 balls. He also juggles 3 flaming torches and even picks pockets. I've taught him how to do that. My daughter does some amazing math stunts. She does some really great card tricks. They're part of the family business. In fact, hopefully you'll be able to share some of the links of them performing.
Definitely, I'll do that. And that's impressive that at that young age, they are able to perform beautifully. I'm sure, hearing this out, probably I'll sign up and I'll have my family watch that show along with me. That's going to be impressive. So how do you said per person? Now, let's say if I sign up and I can get 4 people in my family to attend, are you fine with that? Or is it per person?
Yeah. Well, typically it is a per person thing.
Okay.
Um, however, we can make an exception for you, definitely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for that. But typically, how do you control that? Because, like you said, technology is going to be a boon to reach to audience, but it can be a bane because somebody can do a video recording of the show and post it on YouTube, or can go ahead and have many people sitting behind, like what I'm doing. Let's say if I have a green screen behind me, you are not able to see who's be around me, but I'm just having this conversation, and there will be people around. So how do you control all of that?
You can't, and you just have to leave it as such. sometimes it's not worth chasing that because they're going to be happy with it regardless. So
Sure.
it's not my responsibility to police that. And the more people who see me, the more famous I become. So if 5 or 10 or 100 people are sitting beside them, it's not going to be a problem. I've got 4.5 hours worth of material. Typically, when I'm going in, it's just understanding. If you see something posted, you respectfully tell them, hey, this is how I make a living. I don't mind if people figure things out themselves because
Okay.
we're naturally wanting to reverse engineer. But if someone puts something out there, it's just respectful so that they can have a living, that you don't post everything. There's a lot of young kids who like doing that just to figure things out. But if I have so much material, it's probably not going to threaten me if you post 1 or 2 tricks. And you
Mm.
probably would have to watch my show about 10 or 15 times to figure out everything, to be honest. If you're not a magician, if you're a magician,
Mhm.
you probably watch my show 3 or 4 times to figure everything out, which is fine because it's every time you watch my show, it's a revenue driver. You have
Very
to think about
interesting.
that. And also have product cycles. And a lot of my clients are very loyal. So when they hire me once, they'll hire me again in 2 years. And they want to see some of the same tricks, but they don't want to see everything the same. So I'll do about 50% of the tricks the same and 50% new because they are hosts. They want to allow their clients, their VIP clients or their staff to enjoy the show. They're not hiring for themselves. When you're spending a lot, $500 to $1,500 for a magic show, you're not buying a ticket for yourself. You're buying it for your entire company
That's
or
impressive.
a group. Like I've worked for Google 25 plus times. Every time Google has hired me, I've bought a share of stock. I've worked for so many different departments of Google, but I still haven't even cracked it because think about how many employees Google has. 25 times at Google, that's nothing. That
Yeah.
really, I probably haven't even done 1% of Google.
It's meaning I entered this show today thinking I'm going to go ahead and talk to a magician, but I'm actually talking to a businessman who's thinking like a CEO, which is very impressive. And you've given me so much in this last 1 minute, and I want to decode each of those areas. So, like the one thing which you spoke about, like 50% is the same and 50% is new from a tricks perspective, but it's almost like a product building exercise. You are building and bringing in new product to market from a tricks perspective. And for you, those products are tricks, like how Google keeps enhancing its products or keeps introducing product. You are also doing that same thing. And that's pretty impressive. So how do you go about defining a new trick or identifying a new trick?
Well, I used to copy other magicians, but now I look at other art forms and other sources for inspiration because you can only go so far copying, which
Hmm.
is a lot of times in the beginning for the first 5 or 10 years, you don't know what's out there. So you copy and you see these patterns, but these patterns repeat. But elsewhere, things come from your personal life. For example, my story about being in PayPal or in finance, I'm performing for a lot of those same people now. From
Hmm.
my client list, I can tell you quite a few of my clients, and
Sure.
it's a mouthful. I'll just go
Okay.
through some of these right here. Um, Airbnb, Apple, Bank of America, Baidu, BitTorrent, BuzzFeed, BMC, Breathometer, Charles Schwab, Chevron, Cloudflare, Cisco, Deloitte, Docomo Innovation, EA, eBay, Exabeam, Facebook, Golden State Warriors, Google. So I go all the way down, but you can actually
Wow.
see it's from
Okay.
A to Z. I made myself the go to have one letter or more from each one of these clients, and that's how I define success. And it's really important what you do to define success because now I'm trying to find investors for a platform of having a magic castle in the Bay Area. It's always better to shoot for the stars because even if you miss, you're going to get somewhere close. But if you don't have that big goal, you're not going to
Hmm.
reach that far. So I put myself, I still haven't reached a goal because from A to Z, I have Airbnb to Zoomingo, but I don't have a J currently and I don't have an X. I don't have Johnson
Okay.
and Johnson. I don't have a Xerox. I also had three other companies that have not hired me that I set as a goal specifically, which was Tesla, Uber, and Lyft. Those three
Okay.
companies were companies in the Bay Area, but Every single company on my list, I've checked it off, and you look at that list and some people are like, you've really worked for all these companies? I'm like, yes, I systematically checked everything off.
That's pretty impressive, Dan. So, you spoke about copying, and in the corporate world also, there are people who would come up with replicas of the products, but you rightly said that it doesn't take you too far. You still have to build your own identity. And somewhere, why you have this impressive list of customers is because you've built an impressive identity for yourself and your brand. And you
Let,
spoke a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah.
let me just interrupt for 1 second. When you are chasing for gold and silver, if someone is copying me, they can only get a fraction of what I'm charging. The price of gold is maybe $1,600 right now. The price of silver is maybe about $16 or $20. There's usually a 1.5 multiple that you're getting as a first mover or the leader. If your product is better, you're gonna charge a lot more. So whatever I'm not taking, those scraps are going out to the people who are copying me. So I'm thrilled that you would copy me, because look at people like Michael Jackson or Elvis or Marilyn Monroe. They have impersonators, but that only testifies to how great the original is.
Yep.
The original people can move beyond that. They can write new songs, but magicians often become cover bands, playing other people's songs.
Yep.
Even if I do something here, I like the fact that if you see something, the originators themselves don't even know where it came from, or the twist. Like, for example, that car jumping into my son's mouth behind the curtain. That's something no one else has ever done before, but that's signature with us. So when we've done it with pride. And whenever we see it, we can call people out saying, hey, this guy's doing our thing, which is something great if some people are copying you, because you know you're doing the right thing. It's just, you have to stay ahead of them.
Great. So who's the benchmark for you when it comes to magicians? So you've had the greats of Harry Houdini and all of them, meaning Penn and Teller or Lafayette or Darren Brown or David Blaine. When you talk about top 10 magicians in the world who've come, is that what you set for the goal? Is that your North Star, or is that your goal which you have set up for yourself? That's where I want to be known as?
Right now, it's to be the number one Zoom magician out there, one of the top Zoom magicians. Why compete against people who have a first mover advantage, or where they're being? Right now, if I do illusions, I'll be compared to Copperfield. And there's a lot of things that people compare to. So right now, if Copperfield's doing this, he has his reputation to protect. So he's not going to run out being first. Although right when he launches, I'm sure he'll sell millions of tickets if he needs to, right? So you have to find out what's the competition doing, but do it differently. The stories I tell are all true. I tell an autobiographical magic show, and I do things like a med talk. It's called Magic, Entertainment, and Deception, where corporations can see two different tricks that look very similar but have two different methods. Then I talk about the creative process. No other magician actually reveals the magic. That's against the rules. But once you know all the rules, you can break the rules.
So you reveal tricks, like how they are done, to your audience?
Yeah, I will reveal a trick. I'll show you the principle on how it works. I'll show you another trick. You'll be fooled by it. And I'll show you it's the same principle. And that one link in between is not a casual causation. You don't think that that's the same trick. So magicians often are guarding an empty box. Intellectual people can figure things out. To say to someone, don't figure this out, is to deprive them of something. It's to say, hey, don't think rationally. For me, I know people are going to go on YouTube. So you have to structure your show where you bombard them with so much that likely that they're going to go online, at most probably figure out one thing. Close to the end. You use the time misdirection, and you do a lot of other things to layer things. And once they see that there's so many layers to it, they're going to appreciate it more. Kind of like what I'm doing here. I'm not just a magician. I'm a Renaissance person. I spearfish. I do a lot of other things. So people don't see me as just one thing. They see you as a person, which builds a strong connection with all your clients.
I'm just loving this conversation right now, Dan. You just said that the magicians hold an empty box which they're trying to protect. And can you explain that metaphor more? Like, why, what does that mean? Like, it's such a beautiful thing. Like,
It's
that
like,
box it doesn't have anything, but you're just trying to protect it to show and give an impression that it has gold in it. Right. So,
yeah, it absolutely. Well, there is gold in the fact is if you can control what people are saying, even if they figure it out and they respect you enough, they're not going to go out online to reveal it. They understand that it's an art form and there's so much complexity that they searched 20, 30, 40 hours to figure out your trick. They're not going to tell the first person on how the trick works. They're going to appreciate it with a deep appreciation. If I take you 40 hours to figure out a trick, are you going to just tell someone like, oh, I figured this out? It's kind of the fun. It's like posting a spoiler out there. And if it's easy to figure out, people might post something, but it's not, the goal is not about figuring something out in magic. It's all about making a connection and a true connection afterwards. Like I speak to someone like I'm a friend and we become friends by the end of the show.
I can almost see this. It's almost like as if I know you for ages now through this conversation. It's beautiful, like how you're at least swaying me in this entire piece, right? This is just phenomenal. So, building further on that, Dan, and you spoke about 40 hours and all of that. I just want to know, how long does it take for you to come up with a trick? And if you have to decode that process of how do you identify a trick and how do you build it up so that it becomes entertaining and it also has a wow factor, what does that process looks like and what does that time looks like?
Yeah, you have to be patient with everything. Sometimes a trick might take me 5 or 10 years that I see before I figure it out. I mean, that's an extreme case.
Okay.
I have a library that's probably over $100,000 worth of books, DVDs, and props, and equipment well over $100,000. So I'm very well versed in all the nuances. There's one thing: if a magician gets fooled by one small thing, they say it's a great trick. If a layperson knows one part but they don't know the 90% of it, they're like, "Oh, I know how the trick works." So as a magician, you have to not only fool a layperson, you have to fool a magician if you want street credibility.
Hmm.
So I can fool you, or you can say, "Oh, I saw something move," and you're like, "Oh, it was only okay." So you have to find the difference between performing for magicians and performing for lay people, because performing for magicians earns their respect. Performing for lay people earns your bills. You want to get your bills paid first and then impress the magicians. And
Pretty
I live
impressive.
in Silicon Valley, where these guys are the smartest guys in the world. They
Hmm.
are used to reverse engineering things. So I love the challenge of performing for engineers, specifically the Asian, Southeast Asian Indians. They love picking everything apart. So
Yep.
you have to, really go out there. And that's my claim to fame, is being able to fool the smartest of Silicon Valley.
So have you been called upon your trick which you didn't intend to be called upon? And when I say that, somebody said, hey, you're holding the card in back of your hand while you're doing the trick, which was part of the trick.
Yeah, I every trick that I've gotten caught on, I actually get rid of usually, unless there's a good
Okay.
reason for it. So the stuff that I do is bulletproof, pretty much, or they can appreciate it, or I've shown so much charisma that no one's going to talk during my show. They're going to know if someone talks during my show, I will do a trick where everyone knows the same how the trick works except for that person. So it kind of lets everyone know, hey, don't mess with me. I'll do a trick. Maybe I'll pick your pocket, or I'll steal your
Okay.
tie, or I'll do a couple of things where establish control, and you need to show that you're the alpha. Otherwise, you just have to show something so good that no one wants to talk because the story is so compelling. If you speak with a commanding voice and don't give them a space to interrupt, they're not going to interrupt you. They're not going to say, oh, I know how that works during your show. So you can actually look out of the corner of their eye or their eyes, and you can tell which guys are the troublemakers. So if you get the first person, it's like a domino. If you get the CEO who sometimes wants to talk out of place and you knock them into place, they're just, everyone else is going to follow you. But you have to know that the CEO, even, we can talk about more examples. I don't want to talk about it too much because I could talk about an hour worth of just audience control, because most people give up magic because they get caught. The first time you see magic, you love it. Second time you see it, you want to do it, but then you don't understand it completely. So once you don't understand it, you try it for your friend, you get caught, and you're like, hey, this is cool. I know how it works, but I can't do it. The difference is knowing and doing is on a very different level in magic, because you have to get it to that point where it's 100%. Otherwise, if someone sees you, you don't have a career. You literally do not have a career if someone can figure out most of your tricks, you know.
And you spoke about, controlling or being in that alpha state. Most of the magicians assume, and it's not just assume, they almost get into that alpha stage when they are performing. And it's not, and when the performance is a pretty broad word, especially in magic, because you're creating an illusion, you're doing hand tricks, you're using your power of speech, if you're using that. And there are so many props as an individual which you have to use, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been, before the interview, before this discussion started, I did say that as a child, I used to learn magic a little bit, not too much. I didn't pursue that as a profession, but that's what I was told, that it's not just your hand tricks, but there's your speech, the way you move your eyes, and you're telling the audience and getting them in the control. Am I saying it right? Like all these kind of have to play together as a symphony when you're doing a magic?
I think you're saying a lot of it correct. I think just gathering it into a very cohesive way is something that we have to do. Whether it's done in a book format or done verbally, there's different aspects that can highlight certain things. So, of course, we all know misdirection or direction.
Yes.
And we also know different aspects of hiding the gimmicks or drawing attention to something. The effect that you saw today, earlier, was a prime example of a classic redefined to a master level, if not a grandmaster level.
And you speaking about these masters and grandmasters, do magicians also have these different stages of masteries which they have to achieve? Is there like a certificate which they get, or is it a self-assumption?
So many magicians don't have the technical skills, but they will call themselves a master magician just because they, it's very easy to fool the layperson. If you just dress up nice, you can get away with a lot. But when we magicians look at each other, we award each other with FISM, or we award each other with certain awards. I've won many of the awards, and I've moved on from those awards to look toward more mainstream awards, like being featured in BuzzFeed and fooling all the reporters, the Hustle magazine, getting to 2 million people's inboxes, and getting media mentions in the Business Insider. Those to me are more important than awards, because I can fool magicians, and I've done that, and I still can do that. But that's not what sells you tickets, because one award for you versus an award for, you don't know what's the difference in awards, and you don't even know what's an easy trick versus a hard trick, because we have different levels of each effect, and one effect that might be easy might actually be apparently easy, might be apparently very hard. A layperson doesn't know the difference between this effect, that effect, and then me doing 3. So this is knuckle busting. And I'm right now, what Anis is seeing is I'm producing 3 cards from my hand in a very technical way.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
That's,
But The first one is very old and generational. This is very old. This is just a classic. Everyone's kind of knows what's happening. But the last one is probably 5 or 10 times as hard. Yet you won't appreciate it probably.
Yep.
And it's different levels of technical difficulty or complexity is what we're aiming at. However, audiences remember more the story. The storytelling behind something is just as important as the technical skill. But you still have to have that technical skill to back everything up with.
The remaining story of Dan's career we would decode in the following week to touch upon his family and what the future holds. Thank you for listening in. And we close yet another episode of Masters Decoded. If you've enjoyed the episode, please, you can help us out by sharing it on social media. I would personally appreciate that. It's how we can reach more listeners, and the more listeners we have, the more awesome guests I can get in touch and convince to participate in these conversations that are a joy to have for me, and I hope they are a joy for you to listen as well. You can also help a lot leaving reviews on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. Reviews are surprisingly helpful in supporting the podcast to get to more listeners. If this episode has intrigued you, I would request you to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date and get notified to the future episodes. With that, I bid you and see you in the next episode.